was an alligator with an unhappy childhood. "I object," Binghamton yelled. "You can't object. You're an ensign." "Order," the judge cried. Just as the verdict was about to be read, McHale and the crew led Sydney into the courtroom. The alligator, lured by a peanut butter sandwich, waddled up to the bench and, with a massive burp, deposited the wallet full of the marked $900 on the judge's desk. "Exhibit A," McHale shouted. "Captain Binghamton," the judge said, peering at the marked bills. "Why is this money marked? Were you trying to frame your own officers?" I was trying to." "Oh, Sydney, you traitor!" Binghamton wept. The charges were dropped, and Sydney was given a permanent bunk on PT-73. Chapter 6. The Ghost of PT-13. In a final attempt to break McHale, Binghamton tried to convince the crew that the 73 was actually the PT-13, a jinxed boat with a history of explosions and ghosts. He even faked reports from Washington. "We're on a Jonah ship," Virgil cried, packing his bags. "We're living on borrowed time." To make the jinx real, Binghamton and Carpenter rigged the boat with wires and speakers to create a ghost haunting. But McHale was no fool. He realized the captain was behind the haunting and decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. That night, the crew dressed in white sheets and covered themselves in phosphorus. They drifted toward Binghamton's shack on a raft, moaning through megaphones. "Wah, Lee," McHale moaned. "We've come back from the big PT boat in the sky. We need the transfers, Wally. They run a tight cloud up there." Binghamton, terrified and convinced he was being haunted by the ghosts of his own ambition, threw the crew's transfer papers out the window. "You can't haunt me." The next morning, McHale presented the signed papers to a very confused, very hungover captain. "You win this round, McHale," Binghamton hissed, clutching his head. "But so help me, Friday the 13th is coming again." Chapter 7. The New Caledonia Caper. The final showdown took place in New Caledonia. The payroll had gone missing again this time, truly stolen by a group of local crooks. Binghamton and the crew were in a frantic chase through the streets of Noumea. "Look for a girl with a heart-shaped birthmark on her ankle," Parker shouted, peering under cafe tables. "Parker, stop looking at ankles and find the money," Binghamton yelled, even as he was accidentally knocked into a fountain. The chase ended at an old fortress where the crooks had stashed the money inside a decorative, non-functional cannon. As a Japanese Zero, astray from a nearby skirmish, made a desperate run at the city, Parker, in a moment of sheer, unadulterated luck, lit the fuse of the old cannon. Instead of a cannonball, the gun roared and showered the entire harbor in $62,000. It was manna from heaven, as Gruber called it. "My money!" Binghamton screamed, chasing a $20 bill through the air. 42,365. 42,366. 42,367. As the sun set over New Caledonia, the crew of PT-73 sat on their boat, sipping smuggled champagne. They had survived inspections, sultans, alligators, and the madness of Captain Binghamton. "You know, Skip," Parker said, leaning back. "Me too, Chuck." McHale smiled, looking out at the horizon. "Me too." Far off in the distance, the faint sound of Captain Binghamton counting to 62,000 echoed across the water. The end. Madness on Taratupa. The Chronicles of the PT-73 Pirates. Prologue. The humidity of chaos. The South Pacific sun was not merely a celestial body. It was a personal enemy. On the island of Taratupa, the air didn't just circulate. It hung like a damp, wool blanket that had been soaked in diesel fuel and left in a tropical greenhouse. This was the kingdom of Captain Wallace B. Binghamton, a man whose blood pressure was currently high enough to power a small destroyer. Binghamton, known affectionately and strictly behind his back as Old Lead Bottom, paced his office with the frantic energy of a trapped hamster. He was a man of regulations in a world of palm trees, a man of starch in a world of sweat. And today, His world was falling apart over the most unlikely of military necessities. Garter belts. Chapter 1. The Supply Sergeant's Nightmare. Garter belts! Binghamton roared, his voice cracking like a dry twig. You are the supply officer here, Carpenter. If the nurses need garter belts, you snap to it. You shake a leg. You know what I mean. Lieutenant Elroy Carpenter, a man whose primary survival mechanism was a mix of frantic nodding and tactical shivering, adjusted his glasses. But sir, the requisition forms for intimate hosiery are currently caught in a bureaucratic bottleneck in Brisbane. I don't care about Brisbane. I care about the morale of my medical staff. Binghamton collapsed into his chair, clutching a bottle of stomach acid pills as if it were a holy relic. What a war. Everything is on my shoulders. Sinks are backing up at the Petty Officers Club. The Japs are lurking in the bushes. And now I get a message from a pal of mine at Confleet. His voice dropped to a terrified whisper. Admiral, Iron Pants Rafferty, is arriving today on a sneak inspection. Carpenter turned a shade of pale, usually reserved for ghosts and unbaked dough. Yes. And do you realize what a mess this place is in? It's not a naval base. It's a resort for beachcombers and pirates. Binghamton snatched up his ringing phone. Hello. Yes, this is Captain Binghamton. The sinks are still backing up? He slammed the phone down and turned to Carpenter with a look of desperate cunning. My stomach acid could start a car, Elroy. If I'm really sick, if I'm incapacitated, then someone else would have to face the Admiral. Someone who would take the fall for this shambles. A slow, wicked grin spread across Binghamton's face. Not Julian, not you, Ninny, but McHale. With McHale and his cutthroats in charge, they'll run wild and destroy themselves right in front of the Admiral. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Chapter 2. The Acting Base Commander. Commander Quinton McHale was a man who viewed Navy regulations as suggestions and the war as a somewhat inconvenient backdrop to his crew's various entrepreneurial ventures. When he arrived at the base infirmary to find Binghamton groaning under a pile of blankets, he was naturally suspicious. Oh, McHale. Binghamton moaned, looking remarkably healthy for a man claiming to be at death's door. I'm in bad shape. The doctors, they don't know what it is. I have to appoint an acting base commander. Well, sir, McHale said, his eyes twinkling with hidden amusement. I'm sure Lieutenant Carpenter here is ready to. No, Carpenter is a boob, a total boob, Binghamton shouted, momentarily forgetting his illness. He quickly went back to a wheeze. I'm appointing you, McHale. And Parker here, he'll be your acting executive officer. Ensign Charles Parker, a man whose bravery was often overshadowed by his tendency to trip over flat surfaces, gasped. Me? Executive officer? Oh boy. You won't regret this, Captain. I know I won't. Binghamton muttered under his breath as the PT-73 crew exited. Because by sunset, you'll both be in the brig for life. The transition was instantaneous. Within an hour, McHale's office was transformed into a chaotic command center. Sinks were still plugged, but the morale was soaring. Chief, we found the garter belts, Parker shouted into a phone. Yes, send them to the nurses' quarters immediately, and tell the Seabees to keep their heads down during the rifle range practice. Meanwhile, the crew was busy. A shindig was organized, complete with hula girls, moonshine, and a gambling ring that would have made a Las Vegas pit boss weep with envy. Full speed ahead, McHale told his men. If the Admiral wants an inspection, we'll give him one he'll never forget. Chapter 3. The Admiral and the Air Raid Shelter. Admiral Rafferty arrived exactly as expected, smelling of starch and looking for someone to court-martial. He was met by Acting Base Commander McHale, who was wearing a lei over his uniform, and Ensign Parker, who managed to salute himself in the eye. Welcome to Taratupa, sir, McHale said with a grin that could charm the stripes of a zebra. What is that thing around your neck, McHale? Rafferty barked. An old native custom, sir. Very auspicious, McHale lied smoothly. Binghamton, watching from the sickbed in his office, was ready to spring his trap. He knew the crew had hidden a group of hula girls in the air raid shelter to keep them out of sight. Admiral, Binghamton